What we're going to do is look at a question which basically shows a tree of the development of certain organisms. So it says, study the diagram below which shows the relative number of species in the 5 vertebrate classes: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. The distance between the 2 lines in each class gives an indication of the number of species. So once again, I'm looking at my resource material, as I always do. If I go up, I will see that I'm going from the Precambrian all the way up to the top over there, to the end of the Cenozoic period. Here is my time in millions of years ago. And what am I looking at over here is basically the evolution of certain species that all come, you can see they're all linked to each other in certain ways. But what's important is that by using information like this, I can get an indication of when those species evolved, and also I can get an indication of how many, what were the numbers of those species at a particular time. Okay. So let's see, let's look at our first question. It says, during which geological time period were the most species of amphibians present? Right, so if I go back to my diagram, I come to my amphibians over here, and if I look, I can see that the amphibians had the greatest numbers around there. How do I know that? Because remember, this is where it is the widest, and therefore it's telling me that's where the greatest numbers are. So if I look at there and I can see during which period, it would be the Permian period. Remember, this is not information you're taking in. I would not be learning off by heart what happened in that period and who survived and who got extinct and whatever else it was. What I would do is use the resource material, get a general idea, but you will be given it in resource.
It's about
Don't try and learn all of this off by heart.
Yes, it's about reading straight from the information that you're given.
Yes,
so
use the resources. It's application as opposed to regurgitating of work.
And interpretation, interpreting what you've been given.
Absolutely, an interpretation of work. So we established it was in the Permian period. 1.5.2 describe the changes in the number of reptiles and mammals during the Cretaceous period. So if I go back to my diagram, if I go to the Cretaceous period, that's that period over there, more or less. What can I see? I can see, if I look at those 2 things, that during that Cretaceous period, the number of birds started off at the Cretaceous period with getting less. What am I looking at here? Birds and mammals. I'm looking at birds and mammals, am I not?
Yes, mammals right at the end.
Mammals right at the end, but this seems like a strange question. But what we're looking at here is that we can see with both of them that there is an increase in the number of birds, okay? There are the increased number of birds. It's not reptiles I'm looking at, am I? It should be better. Let me rather look at reptiles and mammals. We can see that in the Cretaceous period over here that it started off with a lot of reptiles, but as we progress towards the end of the Cretaceous period, because it gets narrower, we can see that there are not so many reptile species. Yes. However, after that, if we look at the beginning of the Cretaceous period, not so many mammals, but as we progressively move up through that Cretaceous period, they are definitely increasing in number. So there are infinitely more mammals after that Cretaceous period. They take over from the reptiles. Okay, then, which vertebrate class were directly derived from the common ancestor labeled A? If I come to my diagram over here, here is A, and if I follow the lines that come from that point, I can see, oops, I keep on putting my head in the way of this. If I see here, there is A over there, and I can see that mammals and reptiles and birds would have all come from that particular point, and therefore all of them have a common ancestor, our reptiles, birds, and mammals, according to our diagram. Use the information in the diagram to explain which 2 of the 3 classes, birds, reptiles, and mammals, are more closely related. Once again, I will come to my resource over here.
Would it be the birds and the mammals?
Yes, and why would it be the birds and the mammals?
Because they're from the same ancestor, both of them.
Exactly, spot on. You see, good student over there. We can see over here that although they all do have a common ancestor, if we look at the reptiles and the birds, they come directly from the same point, and therefore they would be more closely related to each other.
Yes.
Right, human evolution. Now, of course, we know that it was Darwin who said that humans were also a product of evolution. Now, remember that even a lot of people still think evolution is the work of the devil, as you know. I've been told by myself, fossils are put there by the devil to lead you from the path of righteousness. But, you know, we don't believe that, of course. We're more open-minded than that. And he said that humans were also a product of evolution. So sometimes when people started believing, even to a degree, that maybe one thing evolved from another, they didn't want humans involved. Because remember, we've looked at ourselves as separate, as opposed to part of everything else. And therefore, it seems to be insulting that we may have common ancestors to the baboon and the chimpanzee, whatever. I always say, look at a baboon holding its baby, you tell me human, baboon, same thing. And also remember that 98.2% of our DNA is identical to that of a chimpanzee.
98?
98.2% of my DNA is the same as a chimpanzee, which means that it implies that I am potentially quite related to that. You know what I mean? But as I say, it creates huge problems. So the first question, again, that often comes up, a comparison of the anatomical features of organisms has helped scientists to propose evolutionary relationships. We said that. So what we're looking at here are some important anatomical differences between Homo, and that's basically Homo sapien, that's ourselves, Australopithecus, which is, of course, the missing link, and, of course, the chimpanzee. Now, if we look at our questions, it says, tabulate 3 observable differences between the side view of the skulls of the Homo and, of course, the chimpanzee. Before I even go into that, let's start looking at some of the things that we know. Okay, I want to go back to that diagram. So first of all, if we look at the chimpanzee over here, moving up. Number 1, look at the canines. The canines are very sharp. They are less sharp as we go up to the Australopithecus, and by the time we get to the Homo sapien up above ourselves, we hardly have any canines. Now, of course, we know that makes sense. Practically everything we eat today is very, very soft. We're not hunting, killing, ripping things. You know, today you can liquidize your steak and suck it up through a straw if you want to. What do you need teeth for?
Yes, yes. I mean, we have to chew less that much. I mean, they had to do a whole lot with their teeth or their canines than we do
Correct.
today.
They had to do a whole lot with their teeth. We even look here at the zygomatic arch, which is the jawbone. As you progressively move up, look at your chimpanzee, the joint there, and there. With us, it's almost completely disappeared.
Yes.
It's much, much less developed in the human being than it would be in the others. The other thing that's also important is this brow ridge. Now, if you look at that, refers to this part and this part. We can see that as we progressively move up from the chimpanzee, Australopithecus, up to Homo, the Homo sapien, that the brow ridge got reduced. Now, I brought my friend, my human skull over here. I know it creeps some people out, but we don't get creeped out, do we? This is our friend. Say hello. We're nice and brave. And one of the things that we can see over here, that us, all the way as up, when we went up to the human being, we lost that brow ridge. So if you look at it from the side, the others, there was the face over here, or the bottom of the face, but then there was it indented inwards and went upwards as a brow ridge, the sort of head part where the brain part started over there. So one of the things that we can clearly see as we move up from the chimpanzee to the Australopithecus up towards the human being is that there was a much greater development of the bone at the top of the head. And we can see that the skull moved forward and it gave us a much larger frontal lobe than the other organisms.
Looks like it's gone flatter.
Yes, and it's gone more out, so that instead of the brain only starting there and occupying this part of the head, we see that the whole now front of our head over here is now brain, which it wasn't in our ancestors. Now, of course, that supposedly made us very bright and very intelligent, which it has. We know we've advanced above the other species, but always bear in mind that with all that intelligence has come an enormous amount of destructiveness from our species.
Responsibility.
Absolutely. So if we look at this quickly, let's look at this table over here. I've gone through the different ones, canines, not well developed, etc., etc. But the point that I want to make is that if you are asked to do a table, you must do a table properly. You must put a heading. It must be fully bordered. All the lines must not be the blue lines in your script. They must be your new lines. Otherwise, you lose marks. And as I say, if you think that's pedantic or who cares, the examiners care, and therefore you must remember to do it properly.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about good exam technique. So question 1.5.2 says, which one of the organisms, Australopithecus or chimpanzee, is a quadruped? Quadruped, quad, 4, means that it walks on 4 limbs, whereas, of course, we know we stand up. And if we look at them, let me show you on here, because we're running out of time. Sorry, I took his head off. So we can basically see, this is your foramen magnum. This is the hole through which your spinal cord goes. Now, do you see that in us? Ours is right in the center.
Yes.
So if you're standing on two legs, it makes sense. Does that make sense?
Right in the center.
If on the other ones that were quadruped, theirs is here. Because what would happen is that if ours was still there, our head would constantly be
a whole lot more forward.
Standing down. Move it back, and it comes up.
Okay, I get it.
We're running out of time, so it's back to you, Ada.
Okay, we've had so much fun.